Alright, Chapter 4. River Route, or Route, however you want to say it. Back in Chicago, Oswald Campbell met with his insurance agent and signed over his death benefits and anything that might be left from his pension after he died to Helen. Excuse me. Stipulating that she spend it on herself and not let those kids get a hold of it. He knew they would anyway, and it galled him, but there was nothing he could do about it. He closed out his bank account and had only a little money left. The train was the cheapest way to go, so he made his reservations. The next morning, he phoned Mrs. Cleaverton to tell her that he would arrive. God, he's taking a train? I sincerely wish I knew what year this was. Ugh. Okay, sorry. Let's see. Alright, the next morning, he phoned Mrs. Cleaverton to tell her when he would arrive and find out the new address to have his pension forwarded. Francis said, "Send it in care of Mrs. Betty Kitchen, River Route 48. River Route? Is that really a name of a street? No, that's the river. Oh, well, I need the street address. That is the address, Mr. Campbell. We all get our mail by boat." Oswald was confused. By boat? I don't have a boat. She laughed. You don't need a boat. The mailman brings it by boat. Where does he bring it? Right to your dock. He was still confused. Don't I need a zip code or anything? No, you don't need to fool with that, Mr. Campbell. Our mailman knows where everybody lives. I see. So it's just River Route 48? That's right. I'm River Route 46. My sister Mildred is 54. She wanted to mention Mildred to him as much as possible. Oswald hung up and wondered what kind of place he was headed to. She had not mentioned that they got their mail by boat, for God's sake. He was starting to have second thoughts, but he had already given up his room and said goodbye to Helen on the phone. So he guessed he'd just go on as planned. After all, he had not told Miss Cleaverton he was a walking time bomb and would probably die on them. Besides, it was too late now. He couldn't afford to go anywhere else at this point. He had only hoped the grocery store down there sold beer at least. There was no reason to stay sober too long, not when you had nothing to look forward to anyway. The moment Frances had hung up, she realized that she had forgotten to at least warn him about Betty Kitchen's mother, Miss Alma. She thought about calling him back, but changed her mind. Maybe it was for the best, after all. She didn't want to scare him off before he even arrived. Besides, she had run over to Mildred's house to help get ready for the meeting of the Mystic Order of Royal Polka Dots Secret Society. It's like the Red Hat Society. Christmas was just around the corner, and they had to make arrangements for the mystery tree. Every year, in the dead of night, all the club members would get together and decorate a large cedar tree standing in the front of Community Hall. The polka dots did a lot of good works, and they did all of their good works in secret. The club motto was, "To toot one's own horn is unattractive." The only honorary male member of the polka dots was Butch Manich, whom everybody called Stick because he was 6'4" and weighed 128 pounds. He was Sybil Underwood's 26-year-old nephew, and a good soul who did anything the ladies needed. He supplied the ladder and was the only one tall enough to hang the lights on top of the tree each year. When Frances walked in the house for the meeting, Mildred was lounging on the couch in the living room wearing a bright floral Hawaiian muumuu and reading the new book she had just borrowed from the bookmobile entitled Romance on the Bayou, a a steamy story of forbidden love in the deep bayou country of Louisiana. She's reading a dirty novel, just so you know. When Frances saw what her sister was reading, she said, "Oh, for God's sake, Mildred, when are you going to stop reading all that trash?" "Never." Mildred closed the book and laid it on the coffee table and answered, "When are you going to stop eating all that candy?" The shade! It's so funny! Oh, these women are sassy. Frances could never get the best of Mildred. As girls, they had both attended one of the finest finishing schools in Chattanooga, but even then, Mildred had always been somewhat of a maverick. She had been the first girl in town to ever wear a pantsuit inside the Chattanooga Country Club, too independent long before it was fashionable. Frances thought it was probably the reason that the boy Mildred had been engaged to ran off and married someone else. It could also account for the fact that you never knew what color Mildred's hair was going to be the next time you saw her. She dyed her hair on a whim according to how she felt from day to day. Today it was some sort of plaid. What? Frances hoped that by the time Mr. Campbell arrived it would at least be close to the color of something natural, but she could not say anything. If Mildred knew she was trying to fix her up with a man, she would do something crazy for sure. Seems like Mildred's my kind of girl. Frances worried about her sister. Mildred had retired after 25 years of work, had good insurance, owned her own home, and had plenty of friends. But she did not seem happy. Frances worried that Mildred was getting bitter as she aged and turning into an old curmudgeon. Oh my God, an old curmudgeon. I've never heard that. I've never seen that word spelled. I've heard it, because I've heard very, very old people say it, but oh my God. It was one of many reasons that Frances was holding such high hopes for Mr. Campbell. Mildred needed to get over that boy who had left her and move on with her life before it was too late. That was a short chapter, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start reading Chapter 5, because that was only 8 minutes. Wow. Alright. Chapter 5. Dreamy, Alabama. Sorry, I can't get comfortable. As the doctor had suggested, Oswald tied up all loose ends and settled his estate, a task that took him no more than 5 minutes. It consisted of throwing away 3 pairs of old shoes and giving away one of his 2 overcoats. He packed the one baseball he had caught at a game and his other belongings into a single suitcase. That night, a few friends from AA took him out for a farewell cup of coffee. He told them he would most probably be back in the spring. No point in getting anyone upset, even though... Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. I was like, he already told them, but that was actually the people at the home, not the people from AA. Sorry, my nose is just... That's attractive. Okay. The next morning, he took a cab to the L&N railroad station on LaSalle Street. He found his seat, and the train pulled out of the station at 12:45 p.m. As the familiar buildings passed by his windows, he knew he was seeing Chicago for the last time, and he thought about going to the club car for a drink right then and there, but the one-day-at-a-time chip his friends had given him last night was still in his pocket. He felt he should probably wait until he got a little farther away from Chicago and his AA group, so he just sat and looked out the window and soon became preoccupied with the scenery passing by. As they traveled south through the Cincinnati and Louisville to Nashville, the landscape slowly began to change. The deeper south they went, the more brown land started to turn a different color. And by the time he woke up the next morning, the barren black trees that lined the tracks the day before had been replaced with thick evergreens and tall pines. He had gone to sleep in one world and awakened in another. Overnight, the gray, gloomy winter sky had turned to a bright blue with a huge white cumulus cloud so big that Oswald's first thought was, "You've got to be kidding." When they reached Mobile, hey! I know, oh my god! So, sorry, but I think I'm just having like a moment where I think I realized, so, there is this train station that's in Mobile. It's a very, very, very old train station. It's near the river, and it looks kind of Spanish. It's got the terracotta roofing and everything like that, like kind of like how the old Murphy High School used to be. And it's my favorite train station, just because it looks so cool. But it's totally inactive now, but it has been since I was little. But I think that's the train station that he gets off at. And that's just, I don't know, to me that's really cool that I can actually envision that at this moment. Okay, when they reached Mobile late that afternoon, the moment he stepped off the train, a tall, thin man with a small head who looked to Oswald exactly like a praying mantis wearing a baseball cap stepped up. "Are you Mr. Campbell?" he said. And the man took his bag and said, "Welcome to Alabama. I'm Butch Manage, but you can call me Stick. Everybody else does." As they walked along, he added, "Yeah, I'm so skinny that even when I was a child, my parents wouldn't let me have a dog because it would keep burying me in the yard." Then he laughed uproariously at his own joke. When they came out of the station, the warm air of Mobile was moist and fragrant, and a surprise to Oswald. To see it from the train was one thing. To feel it and smell it was another. Their mode of transportation was a truck that Butch apologized for. "It ain't pretty, but it'll get us there." Butch was a cheery soul, and talked the entire hour and a half it took to drive down to Lost River. He handed Mr. Campbell a business card, which had a drawing of a big eye in the middle. Underneath was printed, "Butch Stick Manage, private investigator and process server." Oswald was surprised. Is there a lot of call for a private detective work out here? No, not yet," said Butch, a little disappointed. "But I'm available, ready, willing, and able just in case." It was just getting dark when they went over the long Mobile Bay Causeway. Ah! Sorry. When they went over the long Mobile Bay Causeway, and they were able to see the last of the sunset. There was nothing but miles of water on both sides, and the sun was now dipping into the bay so large and orange that it almost scared Oswald. "Is that normal?" Butch glanced out the window. "Yeah, we get a nice sunset most of the time." By the time they turned off the highway to Lost River, it was pitch black outside. "There's the store," said Butch, and they whizzed by. Oswald looked out, but saw nothing. Of course you can't, it's pitch black outside. They drove about a block and stopped in front of a large house. "Here we are, safe and sound." Oswald took out his wallet. "What do I owe you?" Butch's reaction was one of genuine surprise. "Why, you don't owe me a thing, Mr. Campbell." God, I'm sorry I keep sniffling. Sorry. Oh, I just now noticed that somebody just pulled in behind me. Whoops. That's funny. Just as Oswald reached out to knock on the door, it was flung open by a huge woman standing at least 6 feet tall. "Come on in," she said in a booming voice, and snatched his suitcase away from him before he could stop her. "I'm Betty Kitchen. Glad to have you." She grabbed his hand and shook it, and almost broke it. Breakfast is at 7, lunch at 12, dinner at 6. And if you see a little funny-looking woman spooking around here, don't let it bother you. It's only my mother. She doesn't know where she is half the time, so if she wanders in your room, just chase her out. Let me show you around. The house had a long hallway down the middle and he trailed behind her. She walked to the back of the house, pointing as she went. Living room, dining room, and this is the kitchen. She switched the lights on and off. She turned around and headed to the front and pointed to a small door under the stairs. This is where I sleep, she said. She opened the door, and inside was a closet, just big enough for a single bed. I like it to be close to the kitchen where I can keep an eye on Mother. It's small, but I like it. It reminds me of being on a train. I always slept well on a train, and I was on a lot of them in my day. Come on upstairs, I'll show you to your room. As he followed her up the stairs, Oswald felt that there was something familiar about her manner and the way of speaking. It was almost like he met her before, but he was sure he had not. She was a person you would not forget. Mother used to be a baker in Milwaukee, specialized in pinafores and fancy cakes, but that was before she slipped on a cigar wrapper. You don't smoke cigars, do you? Oswald quickly said no, even if he had. From the tone of her voice, he would have quit on the spot. No, I have emphysema. That's why I'm here, for my health. She sighed. Yeah, we get a lot of that. Most of the people that come down here have something or another the matter with them. But not me. I'm healthy as a horse. That was evident as they walked into the room, and she heaved his suitcase onto the bed with one arm. Well, here it is. The sunniest room in the house. It used to be mine before I moved downstairs. I hope you like it. He looked around and saw it was a spacious open room with a yellow floral wallpaper and a small yellow sofa in the corner. The brown spindle bed was made up with a crisp white chenille spread, and above it hung a framed embroidered plaque that read Home Sweet Home. She pointed at 2 doors. Closet to the left, bathroom on the right. If you need anything, just holler. If not, see you at 0700. He went into the bathroom and was surprised to see it was almost as big as the bedroom. With a green sink and tub. Granddaddy actually had that. That's actually what Granddaddy's bathroom looked like. Okay. He went into the bathroom and was surprised to see it was almost as big as the bedroom, with a green sink and tub. And another surprise, it had a window. He had never seen a bathroom with a window. He was so tired, he just wanted to go lie down, but he felt grimy from the train ride, so he took a bath and put on his pajamas and got into the soft bed with its clean, sweet-smelling sheets. He lay there and looked around his new room once more before he turned off his lamp and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. After Oswald had gone upstairs to bed, the phone rang. It was Frances calling Betty to inquire if Mr. Campbell had arrived safe and sound. After she was told yes, Frances's next question was, well? Betty laughed. Well, he's a cute little man with crinkly blue eyes and red hair. He sort of looks like an elf. Frances said, an elf? Yeah, but a nice elf. Somewhat disappointed that Mr. Campbell was not as handsome as she had hoped for. Mildred was so picky where men were concerned. Nonetheless, Frances looked on the bright side. An elf, she thought. Oh well, it is close to Christmas. Maybe it was some kind of sign. After all, hope springs eternal. Oswald opened his eyes at 6:30 the next morning to a room filled with sunlight and with the sound of those same birds chirping he had heard on the phone, only twice as loud. To a man who used to waking up for the past 8 years in a dark hotel room around 9:30 or 10, to the sounds of traffic, this was unsettling. He had tried to go back to sleep, but the birds were relentless, as they always are. And he started coughing, so he got up. As he was dressing, he noticed an advertisement on the wall that said that Betty Kitchen had obviously cut out of a magazine. It was a picture of a lady's dressing table alongside a compact lipstick comb and a pack of Lucky Strike green cigarettes. Was a whack dress and uniform hat. The caption underneath said, "She may be a whack, but she's a woman too." Then it dawned on him. That's what seemed so familiar. The old gal must have been in the service, probably as an army nurse. God knows he may have been. This has to be the 50s. I'm just assuming. It either has to be the 50s or the 60s. That's where I'm going 50s or 60s. I want to say 60s. Maybe 50s. I don't know. Probably 50s. I guess that's what I'm going to settle on. It's the 50s. Okay. God knows he had been around enough army nurses in and out of so many VA hospitals. He had even married one, for God's sake. Downstairs in the kitchen, while eating a breakfast of eggs, biscuits, grits, and ham, he found out he was right. Not only had she been an army nurse, she was a retired lieutenant colonel, supervisor of nurses, and had run several big hospitals in the Philippines. He informed her that he had been in the army as well. She looked up. "Somehow, Mr. Campbell, I wouldn't have pegged you for a military man." He laughed. "Neither did they. I never got out of Illinois." "Oh, that's too bad." "Yeah, I guess, but I don't have any complaints. I got a nice medical discharge and went to school, thanks to the old U.S. of A. Army." About that time, the mother who was as half as tall as her daughter, and looked like a dried up little apple doll, appeared in the doorway. She ignored Oswald and seemed highly agitated. "Betty, the elephants are out in the yard again. Go see what they want." She's probably got dementia or Alzheimer's. "Yes, Mother," said Betty. I'll go find out in just a minute. Go back upstairs now." "Well, hurry up. They're stepping all over my camellia bushes." After she left, Betty turned to him. "See what I mean? She thinks she sees all kinds of things out in the yard. Last week it was flying turtles. She walked over and picked up the dishes. I'm not sure if it was that fall she took a while ago, or just her age. She's older than God." She sighed. "But that's the kitchen curse, longevity, on both sides. How about yourself, Mr. Campbell? Do you have longevity in your family?" Not having any information about his real family, but considering his own current condition, he said, "I sincerely doubt it." Trying to, block them out so that I don't want to have them on camera, and then it'd be a problem. Okay. After breakfast, Oswald went back to his room and finished unpacking, and a few minutes later he heard Betty call up the stairs, "Yoo-hoo, Mr. Campbell, you have a visitor." When he came out, a pretty woman in a white blouse and a blue skirt looked up and said, "Good morning." He recognized the voice at once and went downstairs to meet Frances Cleaverton. Although her hair was white, he was surprised to see close up that she had a youthful-looking face, with blue eyes and a lovely smile. She handed him a large welcome basket filled with pecans, a cranberry cream cheese coffee cake, little Satsuma oranges, delicious, and several jars of something. "I hope you like jelly," she said. "I made you some green pepper and scuppernong jelly." Some scuppernong jelly. "I do," he said, wondering what in the hell a scuppernong was. "Well, I won't stay. I know you must be busy. I just wanted to run in for a second and say hello, but as soon as you get settled in and feel like it, I want you to come over for dinner." "Well, thank you, Mrs. Cleaverton, I will," he said. As she got to the door she turned and asked if he had been down to the store to meet and met Roy yet. "Not yet," he said. "No?" She smiled as if she knew a secret. "You need to go and see what's down there. I think you're in for a treat." After she left, Oswald guessed he should take a walk and at least see the place. And he asked Betty how to find the store. She instructed him to go out the front door, take a left, and it was 4 houses past the post office at the end of the street. When he opened the door and walked out onto the porch, the temperature was the same outside as it was inside. He could still not believe how warm it was. Just 2 days ago, he was in an overcoat in icy rain, and today the sun was shining and he was in a short-sleeved shirt. That is the South in November. Winter, pretty much. Winter doesn't start until, like, February. Okay. Okay. He went out, took a left, and saw what he had not been able to see last night. The street was lined with both sides by fat oak trees, with long gray Spanish moss hanging from each one. The limbs of the oaks were so large that they met in the middle and formed a canopy of shade in each direction as far as he could see. The houses he passed on both sides of the street were neat little well-kept bungalows, and in every yard bushes were full of large red flowers that looked like roses. Probably is it. That looked like roses. He walked along towards the store. The fattest squirrels he had ever seen ran up and down the trees. He could hear birds chirping and rustling around the bushes, but the undergrowth of the shrubs and palms was so thick he couldn't see them. He soon passed a white house with two front doors and an orange cat sitting on the steps. One side of the house had post office written above the door. As he went by, the door opened and a thin, willowy woman with straight bangs came out and waved at him. "Hello, Mr. Campbell. Glad you're here." He waved back and had no idea who she was or how she knew his name. When he got to the end of the street, he saw a red brick grocery store building with 2 gas pumps in front and went in. A clean-cut man with brown hair wearing khaki pants and a plaid shirt was at the register. "Are you Roy?" Oswald asked. "Yes, sir," the man said. "And you must be Mr. Campbell. How do you do?" He reached over and shook his hand. "How did you know who I was?" Roy chuckled. "From the ladies, Mr. Campbell. They've all been waiting for you. You don't know how happy I am you're here." "Really?" "Oh, yeah. Now they have another single man to pester to get married besides me." Oh, Lord, they don't want me." "Don't kid yourself, Mr. Campbell. If you're still breathing, they want you." "Well," Oswald laughed, "I'm still breathing, at least for the moment. Now that you're here, we have to stick together, and not let any of those gals catch us off guard. Unless, of course, you're in the market for a wife." "No, not me," said Oswald. "I've already made one poor woman miserable. That's enough." Roy liked this guy right away. "Come on back to the office and let me get you a cup of coffee, and I'll introduce you to my partner." As they walked to the back, Roy whistled and called out, "Hey, Jack!" Jack, who had been busy all morning running up and down the plastic bird wheel with bells that Roy had ordered through the mail, heard the whistle, flew out of the office, and landed on Roy's finger. Oswald stopped dead in his tracks. "Whoa, what's that?" "This is Jack, my partner," Roy said, looking at the bird. "He really owns the place. I just run it for him." "My God," said Oswald, still amazed at what he saw. "That's a cardinal, isn't it?" Roy held Jack away from him so he could not hear and confided, "Yes, officially he's a cardinal, but we don't tell him that. We just tell him he's a plain old redbird. He's too big for his britches as it is." Then he spoke to the bird. "Hey, Jack, tell the man where you live." The bird cocked his head, and Oswald swore the bird chirped the same southern accent that Roy had. It sounded exactly like he was saying, "Right cheer, right cheer, right cheer." When Roy was busy waiting on some customers, Oswald wandered around the store, examining the mounted fish and stuffed animals covering the walls. They looked almost alive. The red fox seemed so real Oswald jumped when he first saw him in the corner. He later remarked to Roy, "That's really nice stuff you have there. For a second I thought that damn fox was alive. And those fish up there are really great." Roy glanced up at them. "Yeah, I guess so. My uncle put them up there. He won most of them in a poker game." Who did them? Somebody local?" "Yeah, Julian Lapond. An old Creole lives across the river." "A Creole? What's that? Are they Indians?" Roy shook his head. "Who knows what they are? They claim to be French, Spanish, Indian, you name it." He indicated the mountain animals. And in that guy's case, I'm sure there's a little weasel thrown in. He changed the subject. "All those fish you see up there were caught by our mailman, Claude Underwood. That speckled trout is a record holder. Do you fish? 'Cause if you do, he's the man to see." "No, not much of a fisherman, or a hunter either, I'm afraid. He wouldn't have known a speckled trout from a mullet." Oh, my stupid nose. Okay. Oswald had spent an hour roaming around the store and watching that crazy Redbird of Roy's run around on his wheel when the phone rang. Roy put the phone down and called out, "Hey, Mr. Campbell, that was Betty. She said your lunch is ready." Oswald looked at his watch. It was exactly 12 o'clock, on the dot. "Well, I guess I better go." "Yep, you don't want to get her riled. Hey, by the way, have you met the mother?" "Oh, yes," Oswald said, rolling his eyes. "They say she's harmless, but I'd lock my door at night if I were you." "Really? Do you think she's dangerous?" "Well," Roy said, looking up at the ceiling, "far be it from me to spread rumors, but we don't know what happened to the daddy now, do we?" By the look on Oswald's face, Roy could tell he was going to have a lot of fun kidding around with him. He would believe anything he told him. As he left the store and headed back, Oswald realized he had been so busy looking at Jack and talking he forgot to ask if the store sold beer. Oh well, there was always tomorrow. When he got home, he asked Betty about the woman with the bangs at the post office who had waved at him twice now. "Oh, that's Dottie Nivens, our postmistress. We got her from an ad in the New York Times. We were afraid when she got here she'd see how small we were and leave, but she stayed, and we sure are glad. She gives one whinging of a party and makes a mean highball. Not only that, she can jitterbug like nobody's business." Oswald wondered if the postmistress might be a little off her rocker as well to leave New York City for this place. Around 12:30, while Oswald was having his lunch, Mildred, who had been in Mobile all morning buying Christmas decorations for the mystery tree with money from the Polka Dots Jingle Bell Fund, called Francis the minute she got home and said, "Well?" Francis tried to be tactful and said, "Well, he's a cute little man with cute little teeth, and of course he has a funny accent, and what?" "He looks like an elf. Good Lord. But a nice elf," she added quickly. Mildred was always one to make snap judgments, and Francis did not want her to make up her mind about Oswald before she even met him. She could be so cantankerous. As a rule, Oswald rarely ate 3 whole meals in one day. But on his first day in Lost River, after a huge breakfast for lunch, he ate baked chicken, a bowl of big fat lima beans, mashed potatoes, 3 pieces of cornbread, and honey with real butter, not with margarine spread he usually bought, and 2 pieces of homemade red velvet cake. He had not had real home cooking since he had been married to Helen, and since the divorce he had been eating out at greasy spoons or off the hot plate in his room. That night at dinner, he finished everything off his plate, plus 2 servings of banana pudding, which pleased Betty to no end. She liked a man with a big appetite. He was still somewhat tired and weak from the trip, and went up to bed right after dinner. As he reached the top of the stairs, the mother, who had no teeth, poked her head out of the room and said, "Have the troops been fed yet?" He did not know what to say, and so he said, "I think so." "Fine," she said, and slammed the door. Oh dear, thought Oswald. And even though he suspected that Roy had been kidding with him earlier, he did lock his door that night, just in case. The next morning, the birds woke him up once more. but he felt rested and hungry again. While eating another big breakfast, he asked what had brought Betty and her mother all the way from Milwaukee to Lost River, Alabama. Betty threw 4 more pieces of bacon into the pan. Well, my friend Elizabeth Shivers, who at the time worked for the Red Cross, was sent here to help out after the big hurricane. And when she got here, she just fell in love with the area and moved down. And when I came to visit her, I liked it too, so I moved here myself. She flipped the bacon over and mused. You know, it's a funny thing, Mr. Campbell. Once people find this place, they don't seem to ever want to leave. Really? How long have you lived here? Betty said, about 14 years now. We moved down right after Daddy died. At the mention of the father, Oswald tried to sound casual as possible. Ah, I see. And what did your father die of, if I may ask? Will you eat some more eggs if I fix them? She asked. Sure, he said. She went over to the icebox and removed 2 more eggs, cracked them, and put them in the frying pan and said, well, to answer your question, we're really not sure what Daddy died of. He was 22 years older than Mother at the time, which would have put him right at 103. I suppose it could have been old age, but with the kitchens, you never know. All I know is that it was a shock to all of us when it happened. Oswald felt better. Obviously, the old man's exit from the world had been violent means, as Roy suggested, but at age 103, just how much of a shock could it have been? The following morning, when he went downstairs, Betty Kitchen looked at him and said, That's quite a cough you have there, Mr. Campbell. Are you sure you're all right? Oswald quickly downplayed it. Oh yeah, I think I might have caught a little cold coming down, but I feel fine. He realized he would have to cough quieter and try not to let her hear him from now on. After breakfast, he thought he would take another walk and ask Betty where the river was. Right out the kitchen door. Oswald walked out the back of the house into a long yard filled with the tallest pine, evergreen, and cedar trees he had ever seen. Oswald walked it. He figured he must have been at least 6 or 8 stories high. As he walked towards the river, the fresh early morning air reminded him of the smell of the fireplaces around Chicago, where they sold Christmas trees each year. He followed a small path that had been cut through the thick underbrush filled with pine needles and pine cones the size of pineapples, until he came to a wooden dock in the river. He was amazed at what he saw. The bottom of the river was sandy, and the water was as clear as gin, and he should know. He walked onto the dock, looked down, and could see small silverfish and a few larger ones swimming around the river. Unlike Lake Michigan, this water was as calm as glass. As he stood there looking, huge pelicans flapped down at the river, not more than 4 feet away from him, flying no more than 2 inches off the water. What a sight! He had seen pictures of them in magazines and had always thought they were all gray. He was surprised to see that in person they were many colors, pink and blue and orange with yellow eyes and fuzzy white feathers on their heads. A few minutes later, they flew off and came back and crashed with a loud splash and floated around with their long beaks in the water. He had to laugh. If they had been wearing glasses, they would have looked just like people. The only other birds he had ever seen this close up were a few pigeons that had landed on the windowsill at his hotel. The river was not very wide, and he could see the wooden docks of the houses on the other side. Each one had a mailbox, including the one he was on. He looked down and saw the number 48 on it, as Francis had said. So far, everything he had been told or had read about Lost River in that old hotel brochure was true. Old Horace P. Dunlap had not been lying after all. Who would have guessed Oswald would now be living on one of those dandy little bungalows that old Horace had talked about? From that day, just a month ago, when he headed out of the doctor's office, to today, his life had taken a 180-degree turn. Everything was upside down. Even the seasons were flipped. In his wildest dreams, Oswald could never have imagined a month ago that he would wind up in this strange place with all of these strange people. As far as he was concerned, he might as well just have been shot out of a cannon and landed into another planet. How much more? Okay. The next day, he did not know what to do with himself. So after breakfast, he asked Betty what time the mail came. She said anywhere between 10 and 11. So he went down to the dock and waited. At about 10:45, a small boat with a motor came around the bend. As Oswald watched, the man in the boat went from mailbox to mailbox, opening the lid and skillfully throwing the mail in while the boat slid by. He was a stocky man in a jacket and cap, who looked to be about 65 or 70 years of age. When he saw Oswald, he pulled up and turned off the motor. "Hello there, you must be Mr. Campbell. I'm Claude Underwood. How are you?" "I'm fine, happy to meet you," said Oswald. Claude handed him a bundle of mail wrapped in a rubber band. "How long have you been here?" "Just a few days." "Well, I'm sure the ladies are glad you're here." "Yeah, it seems they are," Oswald said. Say, Mr. Underwood, I'm curious about this river. How big is it?" "About 5 or 6 miles long. This is the narrow part you're on now. The wide part is back that way." "How do you get to it?" "Do you want to take a ride with me sometime? I'd be happy to show it to you." "Really? I sure would. When?" "We can go tomorrow if you like. Just meet me at the post office around 9:30 and bring a jacket. It gets cold out there." Walking back home, Oswald thought it was pretty funny that Mr. Underwood would worry about him getting cold anywhere down here. It might say December on the calendar, but the weather felt just like Chicago in spring and the beginning of baseball season to him. That is fact. The next morning, Oswald walked up the porch of the post office. A striking-looking woman wearing a lime green pantsuit came out of the other side of the house. The minute she saw Oswald, she almost laughed out loud. Frances had described him perfectly. She walked over and said, "I know who you are. I'm Mildred, Frances's sister. So be prepared. She's already planning a dinner party, so you might as well give up and come on and get it over with." Mildred chuckled to herself all the way down the stairs. Oswald thought she was certainly an attractive, saucy woman, very different from her sister. She had a pretty face like Frances, but he had never seen that hair color in his life. He went inside the post and met Dottie Nivens, the woman who had waved to him the first morning. She shook his hand and did an odd little half curtsy and said in a deep voice, "Welcome, stranger, to our fair community." She could not have been friendlier. Oswald noted that if she had not had a large space between two of her front teeth and such straight hair, she could have been a dead ringer for one of Ellen's sisters. He had walked through the door and found Claude in the back of the post office, sorting the last of the mail and putting it in its bundles. As soon as Claude finished, he put it on the small cart with wheels, and they walked to his truck in the back and drove a few blocks down the dirt road to an old wooden boathouse. "This is where I keep my boat," he said. "I used to keep it behind the store, but those redneck boys that moved here shot it up so bad that I had to bring it up here." When they got in the boat, Oswald looked around for a life jacket, but did not see one. When he asked Claude where it was, Claude looked at him and thought he was kidding. "A life jacket?" "Yes, I hate to admit it, but I can't swim." Claude dismissed his concern. "You don't need a life jacket. Hell, if you do fall in, the alligators will eat you before you drown." With that, he started the motor, and they were off, headed up the river. Oswald hoped he was kidding. He absolutely was not. Oswald hoped he was kidding, but was careful not to put his hands in the water just in case he wasn't. As they rounded the bend, they went under the bridge and on out the length of the breadth of the river. It was amazing. It was extremely wide in the middle, with houses up and down on both sides. As they went farther north, delivering the mail at every dock, Claude maneuvered the boat inside Tiny inlets where the water in some spots could not have been more than 6 or 7 inches deep, opening mailboxes of all sizes, tall and low, and while the boat was moving past them, he never missed a beat or a mailbox. Oswald was impressed. "Have you ever missed?" "Not yet," Claude said, as he threw another bundle of mail in the mailbox. "But I'm sure the day will come." On some of the docks, people were waiting and said hello, and some dogs ran out barking, and Claude reached in his pocket and threw them a milk bone. "Have you ever been bitten?" "Not yet." About an hour, they turned around and headed back the way they came. Oswald noticed that Claude did not deliver mail on the other side of the river. When he asked him about it, Claude said, "No, I don't go to that side anymore. I used to, but that's where the Creoles live. They have their own mailman now." Oswald looked across and asked, "Is that where Julian LaPond lives?" "How do you know about Julian LaPond?" Sorry. Oh my gosh, my nose. Ugh, sorry. "How do you know about Julian LaPond?" Claude said. "Roy told me he mounted all those fish and animals at the store." "Huh," said Claude, lighting his pipe. "I'm surprised he even mentioned him." But he did not say why he was surprised. "Well, he sure is a good taxidermist, but I got the impression that Roy doesn't think much of him as a person." "No, he doesn't," said Claude, and left it at that. They had been out on the river for about 2.5 hours. Oh, I guess they left. When they had been out on the river for about 2.5 hours when they returned to the boathouse. Oswald was exhausted, and as he got out of the boat, his legs were shaky. He needed a nap. All that fresh air was too much for one day. He asked Claude what he did after he got off work every day. Claude's eyes lit up. "Ah, then I go fishing." Alright, I'm going to stop right there, because that was a insanely long chapter, and I'm almost at 50 minutes. Okay.